Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources.
That time was all about finding what can I handle, what can't I handle, finding ways to compassionately say, this is all you can get from me, because if I give you more, we're all going to be in trouble. And then really, I found, especially with my uncle, I got to know myself really well because I got a concentrated time to look at how I make things mean in my life in different ways and what that causes in a relationship. So there were days where I could make it mean that my uncle was messing with me. And if I made it mean that, then I was angry with him because I was tired. So when he was messing with me, if I made it mean that, then we were in trouble. If I made it mean that I had this really kooky improv scene all day long, then it was okay.
You're listening to the Positively Living podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zawrotny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a coach certified in time and stress management, helping clients make space for what matters most in their lives. Join me each episode and we'll talk about decluttering, stress management, habits, personalized productivity, gratitude, and so much more. I understand the overwhelm of life because I'm a wife, mom to kids and cats, and a former caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. This episode is dedicated to my fellow caregivers. If you're listening and you are one, you have my heartfelt appreciation and respect. If you aren't, you probably know one, and I invite you to listen to and share this episode with others. Today, you'll hear from another caregiver and from someone who has had more than the demands of caregiving placed on her. She's also felt the weight of the entertainment industry and its personal and professional demands on her for years. She knows a thing or two about boundaries and the need for them. Today, you'll learn so much from her on how to elevate your own self-care and build your resilience. Today, I welcome former Broadway star Kate Chapman to the Positively Living podcast. Kate's Broadway performing credits include Mary Poppins, Les Miserables, Pajama Game, Sweet Smell of Success, Saturday Night Fever, also the Radio City Christmas Spectacular as Mrs. Claus, and many others. Kate holds a Bachelor of Music Education from Boston University, a Master of Arts in Health, Arts, and Sciences from Goddard College, and is a health coach from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and a life coach from Wayfinder Life Coach Training. She's also the author of A Pixie's Prescription, a fun toolkit for a feel-better life. Kate and I discuss her story as a caregiver twice over for her father and her uncle, and how her time as a theater performer actually helped her to creatively approach such a difficult task. You'll hear many examples of a technique she uses called constant creative response, coined by Liz Gilbert of Big Magic. One example involved her buying a billboard, so you'll want to listen for that. You'll also want to listen for the moment she sings for us. Her voice is as incredible as you'd expect, but the lyrics she sings for us are just as powerful, and this is the first time you'll hear them on a podcast. You'll want to put that part on repeat, I promise you. In our conversation, you'll hear so many tips that will help you build resilience no matter what your demands. Other episodes relating to resilience you may want to check out include episodes 10 on building resilience through self-care, 34 on my caregiver story, 40 on forgiveness and resilience, and 41 on intentional happiness. One of my favorite takeaways from our conversation is Kate's advice to create a sanctuary for yourself. This can be done physically and mentally, whether as a space to go to or a space to breathe. Creating space like this will require strong boundaries and possibly some decluttering. If you want to achieve this, but feel stuck with how to go about doing it in the best way for you or in the best order, I encourage you to book a strategy session with me. This session is all about finding clarity and creating an action plan, which is what you receive after the session. You'll have a step-by-step process to move forward. Go to positivelyproductive.com/strategy and be sure to use promo code podcast for a very special listener discount. Welcome, Kate Chapman, to the Positively Living podcast. I am so excited to talk to you today, and I'm not sure if I'm more excited about covering this topic that's so near and dear to my heart, or maybe the possibility that you might burst out into song at some point, which I would definitely encourage, but it's all good, and I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here, and I can't wait to see what we come up with together. And I probably will burst out into song because that's kind of what I do.
Yes. Okay. Speaking of what you do and who you are, would you start with telling us a bit about who you are, who you help, what you do, and really what makes you light up?
Well, my name is Kate Chapman. I have been a performer on Broadway for the last 32 years, as well as regional theater and concerts and things like that. And I'm also a writer. And in the last 10 years, I became a health coach, and then I got my master's in holistic medicine, and then I got my life coach training. And really, what lights me up is helping people to figure out what makes them feel better, and then to empower them to give themselves permission to get that in life.
Oh, that word permission. I'm torn about it because on the one hand, I want to say you really don't need permission, but for some reason, oh, we so do, don't we?
Yeah, I think it's sort of ingrained in our culture. If you look at how we were raised, there was very much you need permission to go to the bathroom in school, right? So that's the first thing that we are taught, at a really base level, is that you are not permitted to pee until you ask someone permission to pee.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's so much control that's put into place that we need to ask before we do something. And I wonder too if there is something, at least I've certainly seen it in my own life and in those that I coach for women, especially this idea of saying we need to be giving and giving and giving, right? And where is the point that we give to ourselves? It can be really tricky.
Right. There's that whole trope of, the selfless woman is the one we like the most. And I get it. She's great. She'll do anything for you. I mean, she will get it done for you. She will wait on you. She will make your life so much easier. And I did that for a long time myself until it broke. And then I just could do it no more.
There you go. And I think that's such a good segue into part of what we had talked about before we hit record in understanding what your story was and kind of the different threads that have connected and overlapped in your life. And part of them is being in a caregiver role, as well as being in the performance industry and doing all the many things that you have done, right? All the things. I always like to say all the things. Part of all the things has been caregiving and being of service to others, and most especially your family. Would you like to share a little bit about that part of your story?
Yeah, sure. So I think, everybody kind of comes into the world, you come in the middle of a story. And when I entered this world, the story that was happening was that your father is ill. Modern medicine doesn't really know what to do for him. He's going to not last long. So from a very young age, I sort of was the one that was, making things happier if I could as a child. I remember that place. Then as an adult, my father did live a long life. He lived until he was 72 or three or four, something like that, but in his early 70s, not as long as he would have liked to be here. But in his last few, I don't even know what the time span was of his life, I was his caregiver, mostly his advocate in the hospital and to get him out of the hospital. And then he was only home just for a few more days before he died. And then his brother had Parkinson's and needed long-term care. And that was my Uncle Wayne. And I moved in with him for about a year and a half and cared for him through most of the end of his life. He passed away about 7 months after I moved out. And I left him in the care of qualified nursing care. And so, that was a really interesting trajectory to be my father's advocate in the hospital And then also to actually not only be my uncle's advocate, but to be there with the day in, the day out for, a large period of time.
Yeah. I mean, stepping in as an advocate and really stepping into someone else's shoes and trying to understand what it is they need and doing for them and on behalf of them. There's so much to this. And as you know, I get it because I was there as well. So then when you stepped into this role, well, twice over, really, what happened with everything else? What was the path you took in terms of finding that balance? I mean, we talked about this is the heartbreak and the joy and everything that's happening in life. What steps did you take or what experiences did you have in terms of the tug and pull that exists with that?
Well, with my uncle, it was interesting because that was going to be a long period of time. And I knew it was going to be a longer period of time. And I knew that I was the only one on the floor.
Mhm.
Like I had people that could step in for short periods of time for me. I was still keeping my life in New York City alive. So I would have to leave every 3 months to go back and keep my corporate day job that I'd had for 20 years. I would leave for a week or two at a time to do a reading or a workshop so that I could get health insurance weeks. And so that time was all about finding what can I handle, what can't I handle, finding ways to compassionately say, this is all you can get from me, because if I give you more, we're all going to be in trouble.
Mhm.
And then really, I found, especially with my uncle, I got to know myself really well because I got a concentrated time to look at how I make things mean in my life in different ways and what that causes in a relationship. So there were days where I could make it mean that my uncle was messing with me. And if I made it mean that, then I was angry with him because I was tired sometimes. I was there 24/7, day in, day out. So when he was messing with me, if I made it mean that, then we were in trouble. If I made it mean that I had this really kooky improv scene all day long, then it was okay. Because then I was in control of the fact that I was playing a game with him and also that I would exit the scene when I needed to exit the scene.
Oh, I love that. So immediately you were making me think of conversation I just had. Well, I've actually had multiple times over, but twice on the podcast with Katie Russler about grief, right? And this idea that grief is so beyond like, losing someone we love. It's about sometimes losing a part of us, right? Or really it's about expectations that we have and our attachment to things and how we give meaning to things. And so what you did here was say, okay, I have a choice as to the meaning that I give to this scenario that is truly exhausting. And in your case, you went right to theater, which I absolutely love. So your time with him became an improv scene. But what I like the most is this idea that you could exit stage left when he needed to.
And I did. I did. I exited a lot when I needed to just sort of go and shake it off. I found, interestingly enough, that my skills as a theater performer came into play a lot when I was a caregiver. First and foremost, just my adaptability to live anywhere and to make it my home. Here's a little news flash for people. But the places that theater actors stay are often really horrible. It's not the best housing sometimes. And so you have to make the best of it. You're using other people's cast off furniture. Sometimes the places aren't inhabited year round. So there's a mustiness and a smell that you might encounter, or mold, or those kind of things. Sometimes, I like to take long baths, and sometimes I don't have a bathtub that I can bathe in. So I've had to learn how to make myself content in a number of situations that are not ideal. So first and foremost, I wasn't the only person that cared for my uncle. There were other family members that would come in and care for him. And to varying degrees, they were all very uncomfortable at my uncle's home. I just made it my home too, in the way that I needed to for the period of time that I was there. I didn't change his home in a permanent way because an actor can't do that, but I made it altered enough that it was my space too. So that was one way. Yes, and improv scene, improvisational things were great. My uncle had dementia. And oftentimes for a person with dementia, it's frightening to them. I just didn't make it frightening. I agreed with him that he was seeing what he was seeing, and I asked him to tell me more. And in the talking of, oh, it's this, or it's okay, one example, one morning, there's a Chevy in my room. And this is a valid question. Is it apart or is it together? It's in pieces. It's everywhere. Can't you see it? Well, not yet, but what year is it? How did it get here? Who brought it? All of these questions he answered. And after a while, he looked at me with clarity and said, there's no Chevy in this room, is there? And I said, not one that we're going to have to clean up, but there is one in your mind. Maybe you can enjoy it for a little while. And then he did.
I love that so much. One of the best pieces of advice I ever received. This is going to be a shout out. I don't know if he'll ever hear this episode. It doesn't matter. But Stuart, who ran the caregiver support group that I attended, and he would be there at the Alzheimer's presentations that they had at the hospital. And he would say, do you want to be right or do you want to be sane? And I took that to heart. You leaned into it and you use these concepts of the yes and in improv. Okay. Lisa, David Olson was on the show with me and we did improv together. And yeah, we talked about the yes and you never stop it, right? You keep the scene going. So you kept the scene going. And you also brought curiosity to the table. And curiosity doesn't leave room for judgment. It's just like, so tell me more about this. I love that you asked what year it was. I would have been curious about the color.
Exactly. All valid questions. Like, what are you seeing in your deluded brain? I mean, demented, I should say. He had, some cognitive impairment. And so the way that he walked in the world was sometimes interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is also a potential discovery for you because you could see a little bit more about what his brain was actually doing, because there could be there really isn't anything there, but his brain is making something up. Or it could be that his brain was misinterpreting something and you would be able to identify it for him and give him the words for it and be able to address the issue in that regard. Whatever it is, coming from that calm approach is a gift to both of you because it helps him in the moment. And as a caregiver, that's a beautiful thing, but it also keeps you from that constant stress response that's going to work away at you and take away your health, as you well know.
Yeah, and it did for a while. I mean, there was a period of time where my health was suffering and I could tell old autoimmune things were flaring up real hard. I was getting very big messages from my body that it was not happy with me. And so I had to dig deep at that point because I didn't want to come out of caring for my uncle being very ill myself. And so I started to make artwork, visual art. My uncle, curiously enough, was not someone that enjoyed the human singing voice. He found it to be an irritating sound. And as a singer,
irony,
this was an interesting problem because one of my favorite things to do is to just make up little songs and sing them to make myself feel better. But it didn't make him feel better if I was doing that. And I didn't want my soothing to be his problem. So I started to make visual art instead. And he and my grandmother, he lived with my grandmother until her death. And she was a Depression era person. And so she never threw away anything useful. So there were, quote unquote, lots of useful things around the house that were completely useless, but were good for making art. And so I made a lot of really fun art that it was a side of myself that I hadn't spent much time in. Because who has time to sit and just make art for art's sake? Who makes time to do that, really? I think there are people, but I was not one of them at the time. I am now, because it's so much fun, some glue and some glitter and some pieces of paper and some words from a magazine or some pieces of ribbon or, a little coaster from a place that I visited millions of years ago. I mean, they all can be the centerpiece for a little dalliance into imagination for me. So I started to do that. And it was also easy to be able to put down and pick up when he needed something. Unlike if I were cross stitching, I'd have to count squares or I'd have to know where I was in something or knitting or something like that. I couldn't do anything that I couldn't just throw down immediately if I heard a crash or a bang, because the guy would often fall down, which is not funny, except for the fact that sometimes he did it on purpose because he wanted my attention. And so if it was a really loud bang, I knew that he needed some attention. He was being dramatic.
Interesting. Family trait?
Do think that I found lots of family traits being home, some of which I like and some of which were unfortunate, but I'm working on them to know that they are part of me because I saw them in full display in a bunch of different family members, my uncle included. And it was interesting to have conversations with my uncle about our family because our family is not what I would call close. I mean, there's no animosity that's outwardly acted upon. I'm not saying there isn't any, but there isn't any that's being embodied in any way. It's all sort of quietly simmering, I think, behind. But it was interesting to hear his ruminations on what's wrong with all of us. And he does think it's a one collective problem.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then I went to another uncle of mine is still living, and he has been bedridden for 15 years. And so he has another idea of what's wrong with all of us.
But you have a different idea, and that's leaning into who you are and what you do and being curious. And I mean, all of that kind of fits into what you described earlier, which is this idea that doing this actually helped you learn so much about yourself. And it sounds like you had an incredible amount of self-awareness as you were doing this. So you could kind of see different ways to sort of pivot and adjust and explore what was happening. You also mentioned paying attention to your body and really listening to it. Was this something new, or was it something that you had been practicing before? And how did that all like meet up with moving into the health and life coaching?
Okay, so some of it was there before. I was a health coach and had gotten my master's before I went to take care of my uncle. And I had been on a journey of my own to reverse my own health problems for years. And I had done very, very well for myself. When my father passed away, there were some that recurred that I had to then reattack again, and then when I went and stayed with my uncle again, there were some different ones that reoccurred that I had to, take care of. So the awareness of that was something that gratefully I had learned beforehand. And I'd also learned a lot about herbal medicine and just things that I could do to support myself that didn't need me going to a doctor and me needing medical care. I needed care, but I needed it to be something that was not dealing with my symptoms, but was actually dealing with what was causing the symptoms. And so I treated myself on that level. It takes a lot of introspection to do a lot of that. I had always read the work of Martha Beck, but I added more of her writing exercises into my life when I was with my uncle, because again, I can't sing, but I can write. So right. That's one way that I could quietly spend some time helping myself, soothing myself. So that was one thing that I added in. And I would say that I went there with the intention that I was going to heal myself as best I could at the things that were not feeling so well, at the same time that I was going to help my uncle with however he wanted his life to be. Was he wanting to gain vibrancy? Great. Was he wanting to let go? Great. Did he not know? I was there for that too. But my goal for me was to get myself feeling better.
And really, I mean, you feeling better, him feeling better. And now that translates to what you do for others as well as a coach, right?
Yes, because not only I was health coaching before, but I had taken a little break when I was caregiving for my father and then when I was caregiving for my uncle. And so now I've added the life coaching into it as well, which is a beautiful pairing of making it not just about what you're putting in your mouth and nutrients and kind of the gross body, but looking at the bigger picture of maybe the energetic body, maybe the ethereal body, maybe the spiritual part of yourself. How does that all come into play and fill out the life that you want to be living?
I love that. So along these lines, you've explored the many different ways, really, I think, to live well and feel better, even when you are in the midst of something as challenging as being a caregiver. And we came to this conversation with this idea of talking about caregiving and resilience and boundaries, and you've spoken to each of these. But another side of the equation that you had mentioned to me is this idea of constant creative response. And I feel like you've given us examples, but I would love for you to touch upon that a little bit more and how that's a driver, I think, in so much of what you do, right?
Yes, it is. So, constant creative response was something I was sort of doing without knowing that it had a name. The name kind of was given to it. The name actually was given to it by Liz Gilbert. I went to a conference where she was speaking, and I had a song that I had written inspired by her book Big Magic, and I wanted to sing it to her. Then we had lunch afterward, and she just said, tell me about your life. And what I showed her was pictures of a billboard that I bought when I was at my uncle's. My uncle, when he and his parents first moved into the property, it was farmland. And over the years, it had grown up into being the big shopping center around town. And somewhere along the line, the city had put up a billboard that kind of stared directly into my uncle's picture window. And I just hated that thing. It had a Kia ad up for a long time. And it just was screaming at me all the time. And it just was, it just wasn't great to look at. I didn't like it. So at one point, it had "Please advertise here" went up. And I thought, how much could that possibly be? And it was less than my transportation balance for the month in New York City. And I wasn't having any transportation anymore. And I thought I could do that. And then I had friends that gave me donations as well. And so I bought a billboard. And on that billboard, I put up reminders for myself because the days sometimes were long in the beginning when I was getting my footing and trying to understand what my place was with my uncle, what it was with my family, what it was going to be like for me personally, all that kind of stuff. And I made a billboard that said love. And it just said in big letters, just love. And inside the LOVE was hundreds of different small loves that I cut out and put together. So it just was a reminder to me that what I was there to do was to love him. And if I led with that, I was going to do okay. And after that was up for a while, then I changed it to be kind, because there were times where I could get more brusque with my uncle than I wanted to be. And I just had to keep reminding myself that my bedside manner mattered and that the kindness that I showed there was important, and he was the person that I was seeing all the time. So he should get the most of my kindness. So that's one way that I was being creative to the fact that I didn't like what the surrounding was. I could afford to alter it. I could make it talk to me in a way that was supportive. And I also got a big kick out of the fact that suddenly there were these pieces of public art in the middle of this town, and nobody knew why they were there, who put them there.
Bonus.
Bonus, right? So I just felt like this, and I kept the secret from a long time. I didn't even tell my mother. It just was like this mysterious billboard that just went up that said love. And who did it put there? And what are they selling? Wasn't selling anything.
Oh, that's fantastic. So so that's the constant creative response. And again, that's a name for it, but it's what you were doing in each of these circumstances that you were in is responding in a way where creativity and play is something you could lean into and it could give you what you needed. You mentioned something before about just exploring receiving care. And that's so important that we bring it to ourselves.
Yeah, I think I noticed that other people that were with my uncle that were struggling, they looked at it as this job, and there were rules to be made, and there were edicts, and there was a way to do it that was right, and all these kind of things. And it was so militant almost in its way. And my uncle wasn't enjoying it. And when I approached things with him, I wanted it to at least be a bright moment in his day. And if it was a bright moment in his day, then I got the bright moment too. When I was trying to exert rules that other people had told me I was supposed to be putting on my uncle, I had a miserable day too. And I didn't want that to be the story. I loved my uncle. He was my favorite family member growing up. And so I wanted to make sure that going out, he was still my favorite family member. And that was on me, not him.
I think this is a fantastic place for us to wrap up, but is there something else as part of the story or part of the advice or way in which you might want to inspire others around the creativity, resilience, creating the boundaries that we need to create bright spots for ourselves as well as those around us.
So the thing that I would say is create a sanctuary for yourself. And that may be only in your mind. It could be physical. It could be a little bit of both, but make a sanctuary for yourself and then find a way to get yourself there quickly. I made up a little song for myself and I'll sing it for you. It's just a couple of lines and it's just something that I can rap through just a few times and then I'm in my sanctuary. Or even just thinking about the song, I'm in my sanctuary. And even though my uncle didn't like singing, I could sing this in my head and he didn't hear it, you know? So my point is that make up an entrance for yourself. You can steal mine if you want. To the sanctuary I come. It helps me undo what life has done. When I feel sad, when I feel trapped and blue, this is the place that I can come home to. Then it's to the sanctuary I run. Ooh, it helps me undo what life has done. When I feel sad, when I feel trapped and blue, this is the place that I will run home to.
Yes. Gonna put that on repeat. Brilliant.
Thank you. And sing along with it. Make up your own harmonies and have your own fun playing around with the round of it.
Oh, yeah. All right. We'll do that. Okay. One more quick question. And then I have some other fun questions and stuff to wrap up. But I just have to ask today, what would you put on that billboard?
Play well with others.
That's a good one.
I think we've lost that idea. I think we're not being very good about that.
Okay. There you go. That's today's advice for you. All right. Kate, where can we find you online so you can keep singing to us?
You can go to my YouTube channel, which has plenty of singing on there and plenty of Broadway clips and all sorts of things. And that's Kate Chapman. You can go to my website, which is thekatechapman.com, and make sure you put the THE on there because I couldn't afford just katechapman.com. That was very, very expensive. So I am thekatechapman.com. And I'm also at Kate Chapman Health on Facebook. And those are all different places that I pop in time to time. I wouldn't say that I'm regularly any place, but those are places where you can find out what's happening and to see things and listen to things and get some inspiration.
Awesome. I'll be sure to have those links in the show notes. So wherever your favorite places to go, you can connect with Kate. And so now let's keep the fun going and have a little rapid wrap up together, shall we?
All right, let's go.
Oh, speaking of music, fill in the blank, please. A song that lifts my spirits and makes me dance, aside from the one you just sang for us.
Bobby McFerrin, really anything that comes out of his mouth, but Medicine Man, that album, and especially the title track.
Nice. Okay. That will go on the Positively Living Podcast Spotify Dance Playlist Volume 3 for sure. We will add that and dance along to it. All right. How about a quote or a mantra that inspires me that I love to share?
My favorite one is Latin, and I don't speak Latin, but I do like the way it feels when I know different things. And it is solvitur ambulando, which means it is solved by walking.
Okay, that's a new one for me. I like that. All right. And how about a resource of some kind, a book, an app that has made my life better?
You know what? I have to say, the work of Martha Beck, it just has made my life better. She's got something every Sunday that's free called The Gathering Room that's on YouTube, I think, and Facebook. Mm-hmm. She has podcasts that she does with Rowan Mangan called Bewildered. And what else does she? She has books that are fantastic. The Way to Integrity, The Way of Integrity, I think is a new one, but Finding Your Own North Star has been a great resource for me. So all things Martha Beck, I think she's got great advice that's really playful, fun, joyous, and has helped me feel better on a number of occasions.
And those are all beautiful things to bring into our lives. Speaking of beautiful things to bring into our lives, last but definitely not least, what or whom are you grateful for today, Kate?
You know what? I'm grateful for my family. I just lost my dog a week and a half ago.
Oh, I'm
which is
sorry.
such a, yeah, thank you, which is such a, like, it's such a thing, right? We get so close to these creatures, and we all knew that it would be hard because I'd had him 14 years and he and I were terribly codependent. But my husband and Marianne, who live with us, we just, they've been so tender and kind to me through this grieving process. And I'm so grateful. I'm just so grateful.
Well, I'm grateful for them too, that they've lifted you up and that, that allowed you the space to be here and continue to share. I'm so grateful for you. I am grateful that I was able to have the Kate Chapman on my podcast.
There are other Kate Chapmans doing good work. So yeah, but I am the Kate Chapman. Thank you.
I don't doubt it, but I'm delighted that it was you who was here. And I'm so grateful that you are shining your light in this world and that you shared it with us today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you for what you're putting out in the world. It's beautiful. I am so grateful to be a part of your community.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.